Will the world accept the idea of a global Britain? Let's speak to Baroness Claire Fox, former Brexit Party MEP, Director of the Academy of Ideas and author of I Find That Offensive. Baroness Fox, welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
Now, I've been told by my team just to call you Claire. Is that right?
That is right.
All right. Well, that's very good. You see, if I was a Baroness, I'd insist on it at all times, including at home. Now, listen, let's talk about this. First of all, I don't know about you, but I'm in the afterglow of the news of this deal, which, of course, broke on Friday, and I'm just ebulliently happy about it. Am I mad?
Well, I think that a lot of people who voted leave are relieved. It does feel as though it's the beginning of a new period in British history, and goodness knows, after all of the attempts at stopping Brexit, it feels as though this is the thing that means it can't be stopped. But of course, there's a lot of people who voted leave who are disappointed with aspects of the deal. There's also a very grieving, deeply felt, sad group of people who voted Remain and have never accepted the vote. That's not the majority of Remain voters. But yeah, I mean, I suppose I share with you a great sense of, wow, Brexit's actually happening. They never stopped it. And that is a great moment for democracy. That's very important for me.
Indeed, and I speak as a Remainer that immediately accepted the result of the referendum because last time I checked, that's how democracy works. It's been a tortuous 4.5 years. Going forward, what do you think about the optics internationally of this independent sovereign nation? Do you think the world will embrace this independent Britain, or will they just consider us to be an absurd minnow now, an embarrassing outlier?
That's always been a way that it's been presented, isn't it? That, if you're not part of a bigger federation, that somehow people won't take you seriously. But I don't think that justifies at all the attempts at stopping Brexit. In other words, I don't know that it matters how the world views us. But one thing I will say is that my period of short time as an MEP, it was pretty obvious to me that all of the member states of the European Union were looking to what Brexit would mean. And one of the reasons why I think the European Union top dogs were very keen that Brexit was made as uncomfortable as possible. In fact, they were very enthusiastic to stop it. And it was clear that they didn't ever take it seriously at the beginning, was because it doesn't work for the EU for a country to be able to leave. Once the UK leaves, then why can't another country leave? Why can't there be campaigns in other countries? And a lot of the Eurozone, particularly the Eurozone countries like Greece and Portugal and Spain and so on, they must be feeling, that they've really suffered at the hands of the absolutely punitive way that the Eurozone countries in certain places have had austerity foisted on them and so on. So for them, they will be looking to see whether the UK survives. And it's pretty obvious the UK is going to survive. And it's going to attempt to thrive. That will be its way out, the way of looking internationally. It's not just a trade deal. That's the other thing, which is, will it mean more democracy at home? And I think that that's the important test for us all. It's up to us now to hold politicians to account, to say to them, we now vote for you. You can't ever blame the EU for anything. Very often on popular decisions, British politicians would say, well, it's not our fault. It's because we're in the EU. We have to do this. Now they have to take responsibility. And I think that that's actually an inspiring lead to give countries internationally. So I would imagine that we will be looked upon as an experiment, historic experiment of the first country that's actually successfully left the EU. And that bit's exciting, I think.
And I think you can, Claire, speak in terms of winners and losers. And if this was sort of the mother and father of all battles, I think the UK won because we got what we were told was not possible, which was a free trade deal, zero tariffs, zero quotas, without having to be in the single market. I mean, we achieved the impossible.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the trade deal is something of an achievement. I think as well, and this is, again, very important in relation to what previously it looked like we were going to be offered under Theresa May and so on, that it's not just the free of tariffs, but also that there are substantial aspects of this which actually do ensure that sovereign decision making is now entirely in the hands of UK politicians and is brought home. And so I'm nervous about the deal. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I've tried to tackle it, read it. I'm not a lawyer, tried to read it alongside other interpretations, but there are still far too many things that tangle us up with the EU. It's not entirely satisfactory. And many of us did feel that the government should have had the courage to just have a clean break. But you're right that this was set as how dare you even ask for a free trade deal and retain any kind of sovereignty of your own. We demand this, we demand that. That was kind of coming from Michel Barnier. And I have to say that in the circumstances of that, the negotiators have not done a bad job at all.
No, I mean, I think, did you notice the Prime Minister at his press conference when he announced the deal on Friday, that first of all, he was ebullient, and it definitely looked like a return of the old Boris. I always judge by how well Boris is and how sort of, optimally he's functioning based upon the number of jokes he cracks. And when he doesn't crack any jokes, then we're all in trouble. It's the nightmare scenario. He's been a ghost-like figure during the coronavirus pandemic, and we definitely forgotten about that ebullient Boris Johnson. But he was there and then some, in spades on Friday. He had to stop himself saying that we've got our cake. What was it? We've had our cake and we've eaten it. Or there's a load of cakeism in this deal, in my opinion.
There is, but I people are talking about the sellout of the fishing industry and of coastal communities. I don't think you can underestimate how bitterly felt a lot of Leave voters considered that. So although Boris Johnson claimed, well, we now take control of our waters, it's not as straightforward as that. And there are massive compromises that have been made there. Certainly not compromises that David Frost wanted to make, even though I think that fishing was always one of the negotiating tools. I don't want to underestimate that, because it was symbolic, not just, it wasn't just a matter of the fishing industry, but it also represented and lots of people in the Leave camp said, fishing is Brexit. Now, it isn't, of course, the only story. The fishing quotas will be renewed in 5.5 years. There's all sorts of ifs and buts to that. But the reason I'm saying that is because Boris Johnson was indeed ebullient and he can claim a great victory. But the small print does matter. And I don't think that you could say that those people who loaned their votes to Boris Johnson will necessarily give them back to him in 5 years' time. I mean, it's a good deal, and I don't want to be churlish about it. I'm still contemplating how I deal with this myself in the House of Lords. And I am delighted that the question of sovereignty has been centre in relation to the way the deal has been negotiated.
Well,
but
yeah.
COVID is a big context, isn't it? I mean, you've mentioned it.
Yeah.
COVID, we have a domestic crisis as well. And Boris Johnson can't just kind of buy favours by Brexit. I'm a Brexiteer. I'm delighted, yeah. But I also, the whole Brexit wasn't a destination. It was an attempt at saying that democracy mattered, that having accountability of politicians, and I know this is ironic because I'm in the House of Lords and I'm not elected. So, listeners, yes, I get it. But in truth, the main legislators, which is the House of Commons, now have to look the voters in the eye and answer to them. And therefore, the voters are the people in charge. Therefore, domestic politics matters more than ever before. And at the moment, the way that COVID has been handled and the lack of freedoms afforded by COVID, regulations, the way the executive and the government have somehow managed to make decisions by diktat against often without any parliamentary scrutiny, these things will matter even more. So Boris can be ebullient about Brexit, but what Brexit is all about is bringing politics home, and therefore he's going to have to answer very much, both for what he's done in relation to fishing, the small print of the deal, which we haven't had time to scrutinise as the House of Lords or the House of Commons, and that's a problem, and also for the COVID lack of freedom, the way it's been handled, all sorts of ways that fear has been whipped up. I would say some great mishandling of the virus.
Oh, for sure. Well, we'll come to that. I mean, I think politics is the art of working out who to throw under the bus, Claire Fox. And I think that, as you rightly intimate, I think the Prime Minister has chosen the fishermen. I mean, I think that the plan is that whilst that we were hoping that they would be able basically to fish 80% of our stocks in UK waters, they're going to get something like 2/3 now, which is significantly less than that was promised. As you said, there will be negotiations going forward, but the fishermen won't be happy. In relation to the COVID pandemic, one of the people I spoke to 2 weeks ago, Sir Desmond Swain, Conservative backbencher, said that the biggest problem with the handling of the COVID pandemic is that it hasn't been done with any conservative principles behind it. It hasn't evaluated the sense of freedom that we must protect, and also, of course, protection for business. We're told the Tories are the party of business. Well, they have wrecked thousands of businesses through these COVID measures with schemes like the furlough scheme, which, may have a lot going for it. Ultimately, that is socialism in action, isn't it? That's just handing people money to stay at home. So do you think that there is a wider gap, a sort of ideological space within politics for what was the Brexit Party going forward?
Well, so first of all, I don't judge things by conservative principles because I'm not a conservative. The gap in the market for a new party inevitably exists. I'm not involved in the new Reform Party that I know that's being talked about by Nigel Farage and Richard Tice. There's also the SDP is that the new SDP is making a bid for being a new party. There's the Lawrence Fox Reclaim Party. The reason I'm mentioning all those things is because I think there's an appetite for an alternative to the mainstream parties, absolutely. And one of the things that I noticed when I was involved in the Brexit Party as an MEP was they had a slogan called "Change Politics for Good," and that was a really popular slogan because I think that people did feel that there was more to Brexit, as it were, than just changing the relationship with the European Union. But it was an opportunity to reignite and restart politics in a different way. So I think that is something that we should look out for in the next 5 years, and moving forward. But just in terms of conservative principles and what Swain said about freedom, by the way, freedom is not a conservative value. I mean, it's an Enlightenment value.
Yeah.
And people on the left and right have embraced it over the years. Sadly, the left is, I come from a left tradition. The left has got a very shoddy record in relation to freedom of late. And now the right has as well, particularly when we see the illiberalism brought in under COVID. But I'm not complacent about this pandemic. I think that it's very serious. I hardly need to say this, but I just want to point out that there are maybe people who've downplayed that. Yeah. I'm not one of those people. However, I think that it's, for me, about a balance of risks. And you say about, not taking any account of the businesses. Well, for me, it's not taking any account of jobs and livelihoods and society. Civil society has been absolutely wrecked. People have been told that social interactions are a problem and people are frightened. And I think that, therefore, the way that this pandemic has been dealt with has had the impact of putting safety as the main value above all else. And that is a message that has gone out from the government. And if you mention the words liberty, when you say, well, isn't liberty a value we should cherish? Honestly, politicians, and I mean Tory politicians, treat you as though you're some kind of like mad, lunatic, libertarian freak, a flat earther who doesn't care about people dying or living. Whereas actually freedom is the basis on which society can create free people, making choices, having some sense of responsibility is the very basis on which you build social solidarity, the kind of responsible citizenry, which can then address how you deal with something like a pandemic. So I think that we've cut off our nose to spite ourselves, as it were, because we're now in a situation where people are just waiting to be told what to do and have been robbed of that hugely important aspect of being human, which is their autonomy, their moral autonomy to make decisions. And even the fact that that was given to them, even for 5 days at Christmas at one stage by Boris Johnson, who said, look, I think we should trust people to make the right choices about Christmas. And then and I defended Boris Johnson saying that and having that approach. And then a week later, he said, oh, by the way, we've changed our mind. There's a new strain. Now you can't do that. You've got no choices at all. I think that is bad for society moving forward. How can you kickstart the economy post-COVID? How can you kickstart a new post-Brexit international? You've just said, a country that's going to make a big difference. How are you going to actually have the energy to do that if you've actually told people that they should do what they're told by unelected technocrats at the centre?
Yeah, indeed. I feel like we've replaced the bureaucrats of Brussels with the technocrats of Sage, Baroness. And I think that what you're looking at in this dystopian year we've had is what a country looks like when it's run exclusively by a small coterie of echo chamber scientists. Baroness Claire Fox is the former Brexit Party MEP, director of the Academy of Ideas, and author of I Find That Offensive. Claire, thanks very much for your time.